and welcome. I'm Asima Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. President Donald Trump has warned that President Vladimir Putin has only one chance at a landmark summit in Alaska tomorrow. This comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders urged President Donald Trump to pursue a ceasefire. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump threatened severe consequences if Moscow does not halt its offensive. The Israeli military announced that it has approved a new offensive framework for Gaza City, with Army Chief Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir endorsing the plan amid escalating airstrikes that Gaza officials say killed at least 75 people in just one day. Hamas has condemned the aggressive incursions, warning of a scorched earth policy. The Israeli military has said that it has intercepted a missile fired from Yemen by Houthi rebels, who claim their attacks are in response to Israel's military actions in Gaza. The incident is part of a series of regular strikes launched from Yemen amid the ongoing regional conflict in Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, South Sudan has hosted Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister amid rising reports about the Israel's Palestinian relocation plans from Gaza to Africa. However, South Sudan has denied these claims after the talks. Colombia's hopeful presidential candidate and Senator Miguel Uribe has been put to rest. He passed away after enduring 2 shots in his head during a June rally. His widow, Maria Claudia Tarazona, warned the nation to break its cycle of political violence, as 6 suspects have been arrested in connection with this killing. Lawyers of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro have asked the Supreme Court to acquit him in his alleged coup trial. Arguing there is an absolute lack of evidence, the defense filed a 197-page document, insisting the far-right leader is innocent of all charges in the case that began in May. Typhoon Podul has now weakened to a severe tropical storm as it made a landfall in Fujian province with winds of 108 kilometers per hour after battling Taiwan with gusts up to 178 kilometers per hour, injuring 112 people, leaving 63,000 homes without power and forcing over 8,000 evacuations. The storm shuttered schools, grounded flights, and disrupted transport across both Taiwan and southeastern China. Thousands of firefighters in Greece are battling a dozen major wildfires as a severe heat wave sweeps southern Europe, forcing mass evacuations in multiple countries, while Spain has requested EU assistance, including 2 waterbombing planes, after nearly 6,000 people were evacuated from 26 localities amid raging blazes. US President Donald Trump has threatened severe consequences if Russian President Vladimir Putin blocks peace in Ukraine, while also saying that a meeting between the pair could swiftly be followed by a second that included the leader of Ukraine. President Trump did not specify what the consequences could be, but he has warned of economic sanctions if a meeting between himself and President Putin in Alaska on August 15 proved fruitless. According to reports, the comments by President Trump and the outcome of virtual conference with President Trump and European leaders and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky held yesterday could provide encouragement for Kyiv after alleged fears that the Alaska summit could end up selling out Ukraine by carving up its territory. However, Russia is reportedly likely to resist Ukraine and Europe's demands strongly, and previously said its stance had not changed since it was set out by Putin in June 2024. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has said that Trump agreed that Ukraine must be involved in any discussions about ceding land, while Zelensky said President Trump had supported the idea of security guarantees in a post-war settlement. Let's listen into what the US president had to say.
Any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
there will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences. Yeah. We're going to meet with, I would say, the second meeting. If the first one goes okay, we'll have a quick second one. I would like to do it almost immediately. And we'll have a quick second meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky and myself, if they'd like to have me there. And that would be a meeting where maybe it could be absolutely work. But the first meeting will not work that out. Certain great things can be gained in the first. It's going to be a very important meeting. But it's setting the table for the second meeting. I think the second meeting, if the second meeting takes place, now there may be no second meeting, because if I feel that it's not appropriate to have it because I didn't get the answers that we have to have, then we're not going to have it. We had a very good call. He was on the call. President Zelensky was on the call. I would rate it a 10, very, very friendly. I know the leaders because I was at NATO, as you know. I took it from 2% to 5%, 2% that wasn't paid, 5% that is paid, which is trillions of dollars in defense capability. No, it was always going to be, I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that, I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelensky. I'm going to call President Zelensky, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders. There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are.
Now for this discussion, we are joined by Rohan Gunaratna. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Singapore. Thank you, Professor Gunaratna, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, what do you think Thank you. Now, what do you think, what did the Trump mean by severe consequences, although he did not clarify?
This is Trump's style of negotiation. Trump always threatens not only his opponents, but even his friends, because he has an aim. He wants to restore peace between Russia and Ukraine. And even before he became president, he said that within 24 hours, I'm going to resolve this dispute. And he also said that when the Ukraine war started, he said that this war would not have happened if he was American president. So Trump is determined to bring about negotiated settlement between Russia and Ukraine. And he has, in fact, issued a very clear warning, not only to Putin, but also to the European leaders, that he wants peace, and he wants peace at any cost, meaning there will be very hard negotiations, especially when it comes to land, between Russia and Ukraine. So he has primed Putin as to what his intentions are, which is to stop the fighting. And I believe that he will succeed.
And Professor Gunaratna, now do you think, how do you think Russia would respond to these kind of threats? How do you think Putin is seeing these kind of threats?
Putin is a very seasoned leader. In fact, he was head of the Security and Intelligence Service of Russia, and he knows how to deal with leaders. So Putin will be very silent. He will listen more than he will talk. He'll be very opposite the way Trump negotiates. But of course, he will make very calculated decisions. So I personally believe that there is a very high chance that this war can be resolved because these two leaders are meeting. And Trump already has a plan. Trump's envoy, Witkoff, already met Putin a few days ago, and he is also very confident that there will be a resolution. Putin was very positive about this meeting. So I think that President Trump's comments should not be taken out of context. His threats should not be exaggerated, but certainly this is his way of negotiating his way of mediation.
And Professor, now looking back at yesterday's discussion web discussion of all these leaders, including President Zelensky, and now given that Ukraine is now part of the upcoming discussion regarding its own territorial disputes, what do you think it achieved yesterday's talks?
The second meeting will be with Zelensky, but the first meeting will be between Trump and Putin in Alaska, in Anchorage. And I believe that the first meeting should be between these two leaders. And it is important for a meeting between these two leaders so that they can discuss issues and challenges. As you know, the Russian intervention in Ukraine was largely because of the NATO buildup. And Russia perceived it as a direct security threat to its stability and security. So such matters will be discussed between Trump and Putin. That is why it is so important that before Zelensky is brought in, that Trump and Putin meet so that Putin can explain the thinking, the security thinking, the strategic thought on the part of the Russians. And Trump will understand it because he would have been adequately briefed by his advisors and his staff.
Thank you very much, Professor Rohan Gunaratna, for always joining us and sharing your insight all the way from Singapore. Now we move on to our next news. European leaders are sending a clear message ahead of Friday's Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. Russia cannot be trusted and Ukraine must be at the table for any peace talks. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk warned that Moscow wants to discuss reducing NATO troops in Eastern Europe, a move he says must be firmly rejected. Let's listen into what Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said.
Ale dla mnie rzeczą najważniejszą jest, aby i Polska, i inne państwa europejskie skutecznie przekonywały amerykańską administrację i prezydenta Trumpa, że nie można ufać Putinowi i Rosji i że jedyną drogą, jedynym sposobem, i to była i to mówił prezydent Zeleński, ja to bardzo wyraźnie też podkreślałem w czasie obu spotkań, jedynym sposobem jest, i to nie jest slogan, jest zmuszenie Rosji do uczciwego.
Now, France's Emmanuel Macron has said that there are no serious territory swap plans on the table and that security guarantees for Ukraine and Europe are non-negotiable. He added that nothing is off the table for more sanctions on Russia. Finland's President Alexander Stubb revealed that President Trump told leaders territorial issues will not be discussed in Alaska. European Council President Antonio Costa stressed the need for maximum pressure on Russia and a united diplomatic front between Europe and the United States. Germany, meanwhile, announced a $500 million U.S.-sourced military aid package for Ukraine. Chancellor Friedrich Merz says there is hope for movement and peace in Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky reiterated no decision about Ukraine without Ukraine. Let's listen to what German Chancellor Merz and Ukrainian President has said.
In Alaska müssen grundlegende europäische und ukrainische Sicherheitsinteressen gewahrt bleiben. Das war die Botschaft, die wir heute als Europäerinnen und Europäer dem amerikanischen Präsidenten Trump mit auf den Weg gegeben haben. Und ich kann sagen, wir waren uns sowohl in der Bewertung der Ausgangslage als auch in dem erreichbaren Ziel für den kommenden Freitag sehr einig.
І мирні переговори слід поєднувати з належним тиском на Росію. Санкції повинні бути і повинні бути посилені, якщо Росія не погодиться на припинення вогню в Алясці.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says there is now a viable chance for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Speaking on a coalition of the willing call with European leaders, Starmer credited US President Donald Trump's efforts ahead of his crucial talks with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Let's listen into what the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said.
Years this conflict has been going on and we haven't got anywhere near the prospect of actually a viable solution, a viable way of bringing it to a ceasefire. And now we do have that chance. because of the work that the President has put in. And
now for this discussion, we're joined by Glenn Grant. He's an ex-advisor to Ukrainian Defense Minister, joins us live from Riga, Latvia. Thank you, Glenn, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, yesterday when we talked in our last discussion, you showed some pessimism over the upcoming talks and the fact that it does not include your Ukrainian leader. But now that we know the second discussion will include him, how do you assess yesterday's talks? What do you think? What's your reaction about this outcome?
I think the first thing one has to look that actually nothing has changed. I mean, when people talk about Trump's efforts, well, there haven't been any efforts at all. He hasn't done anything. Sending someone to talk to Putin is just like Vitkov is just putting a rabbit into a lion's cage. So there's been actually no change in anything. The war has been going on now for 11 years. And you heard Starmer actually just say now that nothing has happened, and it hasn't actually happened any differently. So for people to get excited about the possibility of these meetings, I think is a bit foolish. Putin is winning in this regard because he's just got, for his own internal audience, a meeting with the President of the United States. So for Putin, he's already won in that regard. He doesn't want peace. There's not one single shred of evidence of any size that he wants peace. He's moving forward, and I think he will continue to move forward, and people will continue to talk. I think the Europeans are being, just very hopeful again. And I remind you, we were here about 6 months ago, exactly the same sort of arguments and the same discussion, and nothing has happened since then. Right.
But do you still think that this united front and pressure by European leaders who are allies of Ukraine, do you think this has any effect? You said 6 months ago we were at the same place, now we're at the same place again. Do you think will it change anything?
I'm inclined to think not. And I'm not pessimist, I'm realist. Because I just don't see that there's anything there. I mean, the trouble is people have talked to Trump before. All the leaders have been to Washington before. And the fact is that Putin would not come to America and risk everything if he didn't know that Trump was actually going to acquiesce towards some of his demands. Because he's already made his demands clear, where Vitkov has made them, Lavrov has made them, time and time and time again. He's not going to change those demands. He wants Ukraine. And I don't see that Trump is going to do anything because he hasn't done anything before. I don't see he's suddenly going to change his mind and bully or threaten his puppet master with anything realistic. Please, I want to be wrong. I want to see something change, but I'm sorry, I just don't see that this is on the cards, really.
Thank you very much, Glenn Grant, for always joining us and sharing your insight. We will now move on to our next news. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that he will ask the Republican-controlled Congress to extend federal control of Washington city police force beyond the 30-day limit. Trump claims the move could be a model for other Democratic-run cities he says have failed to address the crime. He seized control on Monday using a provision of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act, which allows such actions for up to 30 days under emergency circumstances. Let's listen into what the U.S. President Donald Trump had to say.
Well, if it's a national emergency, we can do it without Congress, but we expect to be to Congress, before Congress, very quickly. And again, we think the Democrats will not do anything to stop crime, but we think the Republicans will do it almost unanimously. So we're going to need a crime bill that we're going to be putting in, and it's going to pertain initially to D.C. We're going to use it as a very positive example. And we're going to be asking for extensions on that, long-term extensions, because you can't have 30 days. And you're going to see a big change in Washington crime stats very soon. Or not the stats that they gave, because they turned out to be a total fraud. The real stats, the stats went through the roof. You know, they had a man that was forced to put up stats like they were doing better. They're not doing better. Crime is the worst it's ever been. But it started as of about yesterday. You see a big change.
Trump's comments come after National Guard troops began deploying in Washington, D.C. yesterday, with some joining city police last night. The full contingent of 800 troops is expected to be operational by the end of the week. Trump says if Congress fails to act, he could declare a national emergency to extend control. Trump has painted a picture of the U.S. Capitol as a city gripped by a wave of crime and pervasive homelessness, even though official data has shown that violent crime has dropped sharply since 2023. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Dr. Sanjay Kumar. He's a journalist of the Korea Herald, joins us live from Seoul. Thank you for joining us today. Good to see you, Sanjay. Now, with Trump threatening to declare a national emergency if Congress does not act according to his expectations, so how might this move influence his relationship with both Congress and local governments?
Well, the political ecosystem doesn't work on the expectations of President Trump or any president in the U.S. The most important thing here is Section 740 of the Home Rule Act, according to which all these allocations are governed. So, according to that act, up to 48 hours, federal government can utilize the forces as well as the services of the Washington Metropolitan Police, and it can be extended up to almost 30 days. But President Trump wants to extend it more, and to do that, you need to have a bill which has to be passed. So he looks interested in bringing a crime bill but he is expecting all these Republicans, almost 53, to be in support. But in order to pass this bill, you need more seven votes from the Democrats, which is not looking to happen right now. So that is why bringing this national emergency kind of narrative right now, it looks like President Trump is trying to address the growing insecurity among the public perception.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Sanjay, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our discussion. Now we move on. Hamas says it is keen to swiftly return to ceasefire talks to end Israel's war on Gaza, according to an Egyptian source. State News reports a Hamas delegation held talks in Cairo with Egyptian intelligence chief Hassan Rashad on advancing de-escalation efforts. Egypt's foreign minister says the focus is on reviving a ceasefire plan. Let's listen into what he has said.
We speak now, and we are talking with the Hamas, with the Israelis, and we're still pushing for a deal, based on Witkov proposal in order to move forward. Of course, we are categorically opposing any kind of intention of expansion of military intervention in Gaza.
Tel Aviv estimates 50 Israeli captives remain in Gaza, while over 10,800 Palestinians are held in Israeli prisons. Now for this discussion, we are joined by retired Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, Senior Strategic and Defense Expert. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, what do you make of Hamas's willingness to return to ceasefire talks? And is this significant that Egypt is still facilitating this process?
Thank you, Asuma, for bringing me into this very important discussion, because this war is almost 2 years now. and Hamas is almost at its the stamina is almost coming to an end. Its resources are limited. Its ingress and egress routes have been blocked by Israel. The Rafah crossing, the Shalom crossing, all the crossings have been blocked. So now Hamas is also in a situation where more than 61,000 Palestinians have lost their life in this war. Uh, they also are in a situation to end this war. With regard to Israel, there are two, three conditions where there is a disagreement because the Egyptian proposal outlines five conditions. Two conditions are very critical to Israel. Out of these, one is the disarmament of Hamas and total security control of Gaza. These are the two important aspects where the disagreements are there because Hamas is insisting that disarmament will only take place after the Israel Defense Forces vacate Gaza or there is an end to the war and there are certain amount of security guarantees given from the United States, from Egypt, from Qatar, from the other Muslim countries to support this thing. So I think these talks are going to be very, very crucial. With regard to another aspect which we must take note of is there are more than 123 countries who recognize Palestine today.
Yes.
Palestinians are, the exact figure is 147 countries recognize Palestine out of 193 countries in the United Nations.
Yes.
And I would also like to bring your attention to statements which have emanated from Canada, Malta, UK, San Marino, Australia and New Zealand, who have stated that in the month of September 2025, they are going to recognize the state of Palestine. So
Yes.
this brings us to a very important aspect of pressure on Israel. There is internal pressure also on Israel
Yes,
because
for internal pressure, we'll come back to you, Major General. Please stay with us as we come back to you for the protests. Meanwhile, journalists in Tel Aviv held a silent protest outside the press house condemning the killing of colleagues in Gaza. The demonstrations followed the deaths of Al Jazeera journalists days earlier. Here's what some of the protesters had to say.
We are first of all, in solidarity with our colleagues in Gaza that are being attacked and killed by the Israeli army, more than 230, according to the Palestinian Journalists Association. This is unacceptable. This should be condemned. Journalists should do their work, no matter what their opinion are. Whatever affiliation they have, they should do their
work. I'm here to protest the intentional targeting and assassination of journalists in Gaza, which is unshamedly an attempt to conceal the truth from the rest of the world and from Israel. There are over 240 journalists killed thus far. This week we know of Anas al-Sharif and his team from Al Jazeera.
Now we go back to our guest discussion with retired Major General Dr. Rajan Kochahar. Thank you, Dr. and Major General, for staying with us. Now, with both Israeli captives and Palestinian prisoners remaining still in limbo, and how might this growing voice within Israel affect the credibility of any future ceasefire agreement?
You see, Suma, the internal pressure is there on Netanyahu because his party has been reduced to a minority. He has lost the support of the other parties like UTF and Shahs. And he is on a very razor-thin majority. And he also needs to listen to the sentiments of the people in his cabinet. A second important aspect, as this news item has actually generated, is that Israel has targeted journalists who were actually covering, and most of them were from Al Jazeera, which has been banned by the Israelis. So it suggests a malified kind of an attack, though Israel in its defense is mentioning that one of the journalists had the links with Hamas. That does not imply that you start attacking, because see, as far as the Geneva Convention is concerned, unfortunately, Israel has not followed any of the principles of the Geneva Convention. Even the Red Cross teams have been attacked in Gaza, even the medical teams have been attacked in Gaza, even when these humanitarian aid was being given to people, those innocent women and children have been targeted. So I think it's a very, very serious issue. The world needs to take note of it. If you start attacking journalists who are reporting from the war front, you are sending a very wrong message to the entire world. And I think it is time the powers to be have to take cognizance of these kind of activities. And Netanyahu is expecting, you see, the elections in Israel will take place next year. Netanyahu has already passed the budget in March this year. He was able to get the budget passed, which will sustain Israel up to end of 2026. So from that point of view, I think Netanyahu is not worried. But at the same time, so many protests within Israel, the economy of the Israel actually suffered. The jobs are not there now. People don't want to get enlisted. The reservists, which the Israel are supposed to have in excess of 4 lakh people, are not willing to join the Israel Defense Forces to fight this war. So when you see these kind of sentiments in a country, I think that pressure should also work on Israel. And my last point is about the role of United States, because I am totally disappointed, because we hear Trump wanting a Nobel Peace Prize and wanting to end wars in all over, but we don't find any concrete efforts being taken by the Trump administration to end this war and to pressurize Israel. See, you can only end this war in case you stop weapons and ammunition supply to Israel, because as and when this will be forthcoming, I don't think there'll be any deterrence on Israel to stop this war.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us today, retired Major General Dr. Rajan Kochhar, and sharing your insight. Now we move on to our next news. Back to Asia. North Korea has brushed off South Korea's peace overtures as a pipe dream. Kim Yo-jong, sister of leader Kim Jong-un, denied reports that Pyongyang removed border loudspeakers and said there are no plans to do so. South Korea's military is standing by its assessment that some were dismantled, but warns against taking Pyongyang's statements at face value. Kim also called adjustments to upcoming joint South Korea-US military drills futile, saying that they do not change Allied hostile intent. She rejected the possibility of a dialogue with Washington, calling such reports false suppositions. The exchange comes amid high tensions and North Korean warnings of resolute counteraction ahead of the annual drills. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Dr. Sanjay Kumar. He's a journalist at the Korea Herald. Thank you, Dr. Sanjay, for joining us today and staying with us. Now, how's this news covered in South Korea?
South Korea, as you know, it is not surprised by the tone that North Koreans have. They were not expecting, although that North Korea is going to reject these changes of dismantling the loudspeakers. But this should be seen as a contrary comment to what is being done from both the sides, and the contrary to the versions of a South Korean Joint Chief of Staff, who recently announced that their there were dismantling of loudspeakers along the border issue, although the JCS said that it is not being entirely done. So this contrary statement is being not well received in South Korea because there is a contradiction here. But if you see from both the inter-Korean perspectives, South Korea's policy is more towards reconciliation and stabilization. So South Korea sees North Korea to be a country which should be dealt through dialogue and reconciliatory measures. But North Korea wants to deny all these. They don't want to get into any kind of dialogue, not only with South Korea, but the US as well. And it is because North Koreans, they perceive all these dialogues as a measure or a kind of a follow-up for the denuclearization agenda of US ROK. And they want South Korea to change their stance and change the defense policy, which looks impossible because South Korea and US is also bound. They are bound by the defense agreement signed on 1st of October 1953. So in the alignment of those treaties and agreements, US and ROK always practice drillings for the peaceful East Asian region. So this should not be changed just because of North Korea's statements. So this is how South Korea is seeing all these statements coming out.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanjay Kumar, for joining us and sharing that insight all the way from South Korea. This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.